Good morning. Thank you all so much for joining us for our advocacy training. Today we have Policymaker Powerplay Tools for Effective Advocacy presented by Alanna Galloway. I am Chris Esperson. I will be your moderator for this session, and we are just so excited to have you. Just a couple of housekeeping things. Please mute your microphone when not talking. However, please be ready to unmute your microphone. We really want to hear from you. We want to have a discussion today. It's up to you if you want your camera on or not. That's totally fine. Do what it makes you feel comfortable. Eat your lunch as you're with us today. If you feel comfortable, please rename yourself to include your pronouns. And then it says you can put questions and comments in the chat. I want to change that. Please go ahead and put your questions and comments in the chat. We want this to be as interactive as possible today. So first, we want to start off with the ancestral acknowledgement statement. We ask that you take a moment to honor and acknowledge that we are on the ancestral homelands of the Dakota and Anishinaabe Indigenous people, have had a long-standing history and connection to the land since time immemorial, and are the original stewards of lands and waters. Many American Indians were forcibly exiled from their lands because of aggressive and persistent settler colonialism and U.S. governmental policies, but they persevered. We make this acknowledgement to honor the Dakota and Anishinaabe people, ancestors, and descendants, as well as the land itself. So we are now excited. I'm going to go ahead and stop sharing my screen, Alanna, so you can share yours while I read your bio. So Alanna Galloway has been a community activist for over 20 years and a labor activist for the last 15 years, a former member and area vice president of Communication Workers of America, Local 7250. She began facilitating diversity, equity, inclusion, and labor workshops in 2012. She is currently the Director of Organizing and Training at the Interfaculty Organization. The union represents the faculty, librarians, counselors, and coaches at the Minnesota State Universities. Alanna is a programming contributor and educator for the undergrad railroad simulation program with the Kamau Kubai Circle for Cultural Learning. Alanna is a choir director, a storyteller, a coach, and an educator. She enjoys spending her time with her husband, Anthony, and their two children, Ezra and Hadaya. Thank you so much, Alanna. Will you take it away?
Thank you, Chris. Good morning, everyone. It's so good to be here. I really appreciate the invitation to be here with you. I'm really excited about the work that you all are doing, and I'm excited to be here and help you and support you in your journey as you become effective advocates for change in your communities. I want to just start by saying this is all based on my experience, as well as conversations with some policymakers that I know personally. And so I welcome and I appreciate any input that you all have, because I know that some of you all are also experienced in advocating for your communities and making change. So I really appreciate you all being here. Moving forward, today, what we set as our goals for the day is understanding the Minnesota legislative process. And initially I said have a comprehensive understanding of the Minnesota legislative process, but it can be pretty complex. So we're going to get a simplified understanding today. We're going to do some best practices for one-on-ones with legislators and preparing effective testimony for legislative hearings. Our agenda for today: we'll do some introductions and some grounding, and then go through those three goals and a send-off. And so what I'm going to ask of you is that you participate authentically, show up in ways that are real to you. What that means is at the bottom here, it says host yourself. And part of participating authentically is hosting yourself. So if you need your camera off, turn your camera off. It'd be great to see your faces, but I understand that that is not always the best for you. Be open to new ideas, step forward and step back. I'm sure most of you have heard that before. If you find yourself overtaking the conversation, please just make sure that there's space for other folks to participate as well. If you find that you haven't participated in the conversation, I will ask that you just push your boundaries a little bit. Maybe it may be uncomfortable, but push your boundaries a little bit so that you can be a part of this conversation. and just speak truth, speak your truth, and understand that other folks will be speaking their own truth. Can we agree on that today? And is there anything else
Absolutely.
that, thank you. Is there anything else that anybody else feels like we should have here? All right. Well, I look forward to getting started. So let's do that. Um, in the chat, I'm going to ask that you just put your name, your pronouns. What is it you do? And the reason I didn't ask for your job or your title, I want to know what it is that you feel like you do and how does that participate or how does that relate rather to the conversation we're having here today. A little bit about your experience in working with legislators, excuse me, and your hopes. What do you hope to do next in terms of working with legislators? What do you hope this helps you get? And so I'll start us off. My name is Alanna Galloway. I use she, her pronouns. Um, and I am an organizer. I'm a mother. I'm a community member. I'm a sister. I'm an aunt. Um, and I do have some experience working with legislators, with policymakers, whether they be city council members, county commissioners, state senators, state house representatives, um, working to make change in multiple ways from the labor world, from community activism world. And so as Chris said in my bio, I've been working in and around policy and organizing for the last 20 years. And I just hope that when we leave here today, all of you and myself as well, we'll be able to remember kind of some of the things that we'll be talking about and apply them as we go forward. My hope is that we get into spaces where our world is a better place, and that is kind of a cliche, but it's the truth. Honestly, I have two children, and I also live in this world, and so there are things that I see on a regular basis that I think can be better. And my hope is that we can work together to make those things better. And so I'm just going to look at the chat here to see what it is y'all are putting in because I do see some work in here. I'll say I'm experiencing some network difficulties, so I'm on two devices today. So thank you for those of you who have who've participated in the chat. I see Nancy says she manages the Minnesota Oral Health Coalition here because MPHA rocks, especially in the policy realm, and I want to learn from everyone. Thank you, Nancy. Lori, she, her, natural advocate in all spaces. Advocacy is a big part of the work I'm pursuing, so I look forward to learning more skills. Holly, local public health nurse, working especially in disease prevention and control and vaccines. Little experience with legislators. I'm glad you're here. So thank you all. And so, I'm not going to share all of them. I'm not going to read all of them out loud because there's so many of you, and I appreciate your engagement. And so I just want you all to see who's in the space with you. I don't know if you all know each other, but it may be really cool, excuse me, to see who's here with you and who maybe you can collaborate with on some of your work. So let's get to it, huh? I like to start with some a grounding exercise. And I'm going to continue to put your stuff in the chat. I'm going to ask that if you know this poem, I'm going to ask that you indulge me a little bit because I'm not gonna share everything with you right away, but I'm gonna read this poem to you, and it is a little long, but but it is so relevant, and so I really wanted to share this with you today. Let America be America again. Let America be America again. Let it be the dream it used to be. Let it be the pioneer on the plain, seeking a home where he himself is free. America never was America to me. Let America be the dream, the dreamer's dream. Let that great, strong land of love, where never kings connive or tyrants scheme, that any man be crushed by one above. It never was America to me. Oh, let my land be a land where liberty is crowned with no false patriotic wreath, but opportunity is real and life is free. Equality is in the air we breathe. There's never been equality for me, nor freedom in this homeland of the free. Say, who are you that mumbles in the dark? And who are you that draws your veil across the stars? I am the poor white, fooled and pushed apart. I am the Negro bearing slavery's scars. I am the red man driven from the land. I am the immigrant clutching the hope I seek and finding only the same old stupid plan of dog eat dog, of mighty crush the weak. I am the young man, full of strength and hope, tangled in that ancient endless chain of profit, power, gain, of grab the land, of grab the gold, of grab the ways of satisfying need, of work the men, of take the pay, of owning everything for one's own greed. I am the farmer, bondsman to the soil. I am the worker sold to the machine. I am the Negro, servant to you all. I am the people, humble, hungry, mean, hungry yet today despite the dream. Beaten yet today, oh pioneers. I am the man who never got ahead, the poorest worker, bartered through the years. Yet I'm the one who dreamt our basic dream in the old world while still a serf of kings, who dreamt a dream so strong, so brave, so true, that even yet its mighty daring sings in every brick and stone, in every furrow turn, that's made America the land it has become. Oh, I'm the man who sailed those early seas in search of what I meant to be my home. For I'm the one who left dark Ireland's shore and Poland's plain and England's grassy lea, and torn from black Africa's strand I came to build a homeland of the free. The free? Who said the free? Not me, surely not me. The millions on relief today, the millions shot down when we strike, the millions who have nothing for our pay, for all the dreams we've dreamed and all the songs we've sung and all the hopes we've held and all the flags we've hung, the millions who have nothing for our pay except the dream that's almost dead today. Oh, let America be America again, the land that never has been yet, and yet must be, the land where every man is free, the land that's mine, the poor man's, Indians, Negroes, me. Who made America? Whose sweat and blood, whose faith and pain, whose hand at the foundry, whose plow in the rain, must bring back our mighty dream again. Sure, call me any ugly name you choose. The steel of freedom does not stain. But those who live like leeches on the people's lives, we must take back our land again, America. Oh, yes, I say it plain. America never was America to me. And yet I swear this oath America will be. Out the rack and ruin of our gangster death, the rape and rot of graft and stealth and lies, we the people must redeem the land, the mines, the plants, the rivers, the mountains, and the endless plain, all, all the stretch of these great green states, and make America again. Thank you for letting me read that to you. I would love to hear any thoughts. What does this bring up for you? And I'm going to stop sharing my screen so I can see you all. How does this relate to our discussion we're having today? Please feel free to jump in or put it in the chat.
I can jump in. This is Pete Miller.
Hi,
To
Pete.
me, it sounded like we all have a history and we all have a role and we all have a voice.
Thank you. Thank you, Pete. You know, it's funny because I was racking my brain like, should I read this poem? It's a very long poem to share in a space like this, but it was so relevant. And the reason that I actually did not tell you who wrote that poem, and I will. Does anybody know that poem? Has anyone heard it before? I'll ask this. When do you think that poem was written? So that poem was written by this poet. Does anyone recognize him? This is Langston Hughes, who was a great um, Harlem Renaissance poet. And this poem was written in 1936. And that's amazing to me because of how relevant it is immediately, how relevant it is today. There's some language that might give away that it wasn't written very recently, but it is so relevant in every other way, I believe. Right? We talk about, as I said, I'm a labor advocate, and so he references the millions who have nothing for our pay. He references corporate greed. He references all these things that we're talking about today that are being talked about in the Senate, in the House of Representatives, both state and federal, and in our city councils and so all of these things that we've been talking about. Like I said, this is such a relevant, immediate poem. And so I say that to say that I say that to share that this is long work. It's hard work. Um, And I see Lori says there's a lot of antiquated language, but it does speak to the varied experiences for those of us who have lived in the margins. The US was not intended for everyone. And of course, its origins are racist, genocidal, and colonizing. The problems noted here are old and lasting, which is by design. Thank you for that, Lori. And Holly says, here we are 90 years later in the same space, in the same place. Exactly. And so, I just want to say that because this is long work. It's incremental work. It's incredibly incremental work. So, laws and legislation and policy, there won't be one law that corrects the issues stated in this piece, but it's got to be many laws and lots of work from all of us. And so, again, I just want to thank you for being here today. Thank you for being here in the work. And so let's get to work, yeah? So the Minnesota legislative process, like I said, it can be very, very complex. This is an image from the Minnesota State Senate website, but we're going to distill it down a little bit. And so if this is really great information, we don't have time for all of it right now. We are going to distill it a little bit down, but if you want this source, it is from the Minnesota State Senate website. And so it's a lot of great information. So I suggest you take a look at that to really get in the nitty gritty of how these bills become laws in the state of Minnesota. But in Minnesota, generally, this is how it works, more simplified. A bill is introduced in the Senate and or in the House. The bill is discussed in relevant committees in that chamber, and it can be amended. And so it kind of goes around in that process a bunch. And it gets discussed and passed on the floor of that chamber. And then it goes to conference committee. And in conference committee, both the chambers, the House and the Senate, discuss the bill. Sometimes what comes to conference committee on the House side is different than what comes to conference committee on the Senate side. And so they have to talk about how to get that together into the language. Then it goes back to the floor and to the governor, and the governor signs the bill. Now, it's possible that if the governor decides not to sign a bill, there's a threshold that can vote for a bill to make it a law without the governor's signature. Has anybody had any experience with some of this? I know some of you have. But does this sound familiar? I'm going to take that as a yes. can take that for those of you who have had that experience as a yes. Um, so yeah. Here's another quote. I like to work with quotes. This is Frederick Douglass. Power concedes nothing without a demand. It never did, and it never will. This is all sorts of power. This is the power, the legislative power. This is even within ourselves, right? Sometimes we need, if we're going to change something, something needs to move us to make a change. And so I love this quote because it's so relevant for, I believe, every aspect of every change that ever happens, at least in an abstract sense. Power within ourselves, what we do, whether it's a habit that we have, we won't change it unless we need to change it. So I want to ask you a question. What is power? I'm asking that you respond, whether in the chat or vocally. What is power? What does the word power mean? I'm an organizer, so this is where I think. This is my brain space. Martha says ability to get people to listen to you. Nev says influence. Lori says power. Now y'all got moving now. Power is a social construct, but is also related to control of resources, relationships, media. Holly, influence, ability to direct. Power is protection, Lucy says. Thank you. All of that is true. All of that is true. And I don't come to you with a definition of the word power because I know that you know what power means. And it means lots of different things, right? It means lots of different things. But what it really means is just, Jakara says privilege. Chris says, I love what Lori says. It seems that the most power is keeping the status quo. And so thank you for that, because power is all of those things. Power has the ability to move things and make change in all of these ways that you've said. Any other thoughts on power? What about responsibility? Thank you, Eric. What about demand? What is demand? What does demand mean to you? Because we have two things in this quote. We have power. Power concedes nothing without a demand. It never did and it never will. Tara says the will of people and what they want. Demand is desire. Power is localized. Demand is power of the majority. Thank you. So yes, demand is all of these things. Like we said, power is the ability to move things, make change, and demand is power over power, right? How do we must do something, and we must do something in a certain way sometimes, right? Power concedes nothing without a demand. It never did, and it never will. So it's important. There's lots of different ways to have power. Like I said, I'm an organizer. So in my brain, on a regular basis, I'm thinking about power and how power moves and what power is and how we exert power. But today we're here to talk about legislative power. Legislative power is how we change our laws and how we change our policies. It's what we have agreed as a society will govern ourselves. And so how do we access that legislative power but through our legislators? We have to engage our policymakers in order to enact the power over our governing structures that we have given to these legislators, we have to make sure that they know where their power comes from, and their power comes from their constituency and their base. Does that resonate with anyone? Can you tell me some other ways that we have power other than legislative power? And I would love to hear some voices. If you have, we have relational power, right? We have power between ourselves. We have power to, when it comes to in our communities and our families. We can go to the media. Exactly. We have individual power, religious power. We have we all have power, though the degree can vary depending on identities and circumstances. Thank you, Lori. Exactly. Absolutely. We all, and it's important that we understand our power and stand in our power. We have social and community power. We have physical power. Some of us are very strong and can lift heavy things. Some of us should maybe lift more things on a regular basis and go to the gym myself. It's a great reminder. Maybe I'll go to the gym sometime soon. Art is power. So there's so many ways that we have power. Community is power. We have power in all of these different ways. And thank you for engaging with me in this way. I'm just going to give it a few more seconds because I see discussion coming in. Bargaining power, yes, as workers. Or vendors or buyers or renters, we have bargaining power. One religion has more power over other religions, which may be problematic. Thank you, Lisa. So we understand power. We understand that power is the ability to move things. The power is the ability to make change. And again, here we are talking about legislative power, which is how we've decided as a community, as a society, this is how our society runs. This is how we're going to make sure that people get what they need, and we have to work to ensure that people get what they need. Thank you for engaging in that discussion. So we said we have to engage our policymakers in order to access their power, and in order to do that, we have to. The best way, in my view, to do that is with one-on-ones, is including one-on-ones is what I'll say, right? There are all of those other things. We can protest, we can bargain, we can go to the media, all sorts of things. But we have to have conversations with them. So first we got to set it up. Call their legislative assistant to organize a meeting. I say the legislative assistant because legislative assistants have a lot of power, right? When it comes to those legislators, they manage their schedules. They tell them what is really important today, what's happening in the news, who do you need to speak with, who do you need to engage with. So if you have a relationship, if you get a relationship with that legislative assistant, then they can help you engage with the legislator. Honestly, I know a few policymakers, and whenever you talk to them, you say, "Can I get on your schedule?" They say, "Come talk to my legislative assistant." So it's always good to have relationships with the legislators themselves, but the best relationship will be with their legislative assistant or legislative aide. And in the state of Minnesota, their legislative assistant is listed right on their website with their phone number. So you can email the legislator, and I do suggest doing so. But either way, make sure that you engage with their legislative assistant one-on-one, because what might happen, and what I've seen happen, is people talk to legislators and the legislator goes, "Okay, I'll get that on my calendar," or "Okay, that's going to be a priority to me." And we have to remember, legislators are people. They are busy people. Usually, if they're doing their work, they're busy people. And sometimes things get away from them. But the legislative assistant, their whole job is to make sure that those things stay in check. And so engage with the legislative assistant. Engage with the legislative assistant. I could say that over and over and over again. That could be the one takeaway today, really. because those are the folks with the immediate power over the legislators. Secondly, if there's already a bill in place that you're talking about, always refer to the bill number if you have it, or if there's no bill number, just the topic. Let them know, I'm here to talk to you about vaccines in our schools, or whatever the case may be. I'm here to talk to you about HF, that stands for House File, this number. I'm here to talk about SF, Senate File. And so, because that way they can really tie you to the issue. Sometimes, of course, you'll be talking to them about something that doesn't have a bill yet. And so if it doesn't have a bill yet, of course, there's no bill number. But if there is a bill number, make sure to if you have access to that bill number, make sure that you refer to that bill number, or sometimes there will be a name of the bill. But best is to refer to the bill number, but if, of course, or the topic. Next, who do you represent? Right? You may not necessarily be there as a part of your job. As I said earlier in the day, I asked you, what do you do, as opposed to who do you work for or what is your job title? But who are you there to represent? Are you representing people with disabilities? Are you representing people who use the parks and recreation centers? Are you there representing teachers, right? We all represent someone. It's hard for us sometimes to think of us as part of a larger group, but we're all part of larger groups, many larger groups. I, for instance, I'm a mother, I'm a Black person, I'm a woman, I am an organizer, I am a union member, I am a person with children in the St. Paul public schools. And so those are all, among other things, and those are all people that I can advocate for. When I go to if I go to the state capitol, if I go to City Hall, if I need to talk to somebody, I say, I'm a person who is representing these communities, this community, or this larger number of communities, because this is what's important to us, right? We have to remember, again, as an organizer, I'm thinking about people power, right? And so we can exert people power over our legislators and let them know this is a large number of people who are interested in this issue. It's not just Alanna's issue. If it's just Alanna's issue, I promise you it's not going to get passed, even regardless of how many people or how my relationship is with the legislator, regardless of how well I do on this whole process that we're going to talk about today. If it's just about Alanna, it's not going to be interesting enough to get not only one legislator, but the whole legislature to move on something. And so we have to communicate, who is it that is being represented by this issue? Who is being impacted by this issue? So when you get to this conversation, first of all, let me get back to where I need to be. When you get to this conversation, it's important that it's important to, my thing is delayed here, but it's working. Oh, I got kicked out. When we get to this conversation, it's important to know a few things. And if you'll bear with me just a few seconds, I'm going to rejoin.
Do you want me to share your slides, Alanna?
No, I'm back in. Thank you. I apologize. So when you get to this conversation, it's important that you succinctly and very clearly express a few things. And we're going to talk about these things in detail in a little bit. But the first thing is, what is your message? 2, what is a relevant story to this topic? And separate from story is data. So a story is what happened or what's happening. Data is the numbers about it. Why does it matter? You want to have a specific ask of this legislator. You want to tell this legislator why it's important that they act on this issue, why them in particular. And then you want to anticipate what questions they have. And if you can, you want to have a physical takeaway and always follow up with an email. Again, that's what is your message, a relevant story, relevant data, why does it matter, a specific ask, why this legislator or policymaker, anticipate their questions, have a physical takeaway if you can, and follow up with an email. So the first thing was the message. And your message is the one thing that you want your policymaker to remember. This is your thesis statement, right? We've all been in English classes or some classes where we've had to write a paper, and we have to be able to succinctly really just get the point out, give them one sentence and say it over and over and over again when you speak to them so that they remember that this is the thing that's really important. And so if your point is undocumented immigrants need access to healthcare, right? Or if you have a specific thing that will get that, if you just keep telling them undocumented immigrants need access to healthcare, they'll remember, okay, that's right. And this is what needs to be done about it. Or we need to keep cigarettes out of the hands of children, or kids need free meals during the school day. It's a thesis statement, it's a mantra, it's a thing that you say over and over again so that they don't forget what's important. The next thing we said is relevant story. And so the hope is that you have a really great story to back up this issue, right? To back up a solution to this issue. Of course, sometimes our engagement with policymakers is for a new policy or to stop a new policy from happening, right? And people are moved by stories. This is a thing that is so true in every aspect of our lives. Sometimes, you get to work and people say, how was your weekend? You say, listen to what happened to me this weekend, right? And we get moved by those stories. And policymakers are no different. Again, policymakers are human, just like we are. Just like we are moved by stories, policymakers are moved by stories as well. And so you want to have the best story that illustrates the point of your message. And this may not necessarily be a story about you or someone you know, but you do know that it is credible. It's important that we are telling the truth when we get to these spaces. And we are very clearly representing well the issue and ourselves and the communities that we represent. If they can't trust us to tell the story, then they won't take our asks seriously. You can have the closest story. And I say two is better than one, right? If you have enough time to meet with this legislator and give them 2 stories, then that's great. The first one is the best story, even if it doesn't have anything to do with you, even if you don't know this person, but it's a really great story to illustrate the issue. The second one is your closest story. Maybe something similar happened to your brother or your cousin or your coworker or your coworker's friend or somebody, but it's close to you and you can represent well that this is an issue. It's clear, again, without embellishment, and make sure that the change you seek would change the outcome of the story. Does that make sense? I found myself telling stories in spaces and realizing halfway through the story, oh, that's actually not going to be an issue, right? This change that I seek actually would not help this issue. And so it's really important that you craft this before you get to the meeting with the legislator. And these are things, of course, by the time you get to a point where you want to talk to a legislator about something like this, you'll probably have these in your back pocket. But it is important to make sure that you are being clear, concise, succinct, and credible, right? Again, without embellishment. Now, where the story will move the legislator, the data is what allows that legislator to move. How many constituents are impacted? You want to quantify the impact of the policy change you're seeking. So if 50% of the constituency has an issue, how many of that 50% would this would be impacted by the change, right? Sometimes, for the most part, usually a policy doesn't actually cover 100% of the people who have the issue. So sometimes maybe 30% of 50% will be impacted by this change that I'm looking for. Statistics, numbers, percentages, and dollars. And what I'll tell you is this. You can do this very quickly. The policymaker doesn't always want to know these numbers, but they want to know that they can find them. They want to know that they are available. And it's good for you if you can tell them that you're the person to get this information from. 15% of Minnesotans face this issue. If this is enacted, 100,000% or 100,000 Minnesotans will be impacted. So those numbers are really great. And what I'll say is this. I remember in science class, and you may remember this too. In science class, they told us, if your number is too round, don't let it be that round. If you do 20 trials and 10 come out this way, do 21 so that it doesn't look like 50%, right? And so less round numbers are more believable. And you may not be doing the studies, of course, that you're citing in these, but beware of studies that show very round numbers. Does that make sense to you? Thank you. Any questions so far?
Yeah. Hello, this is Linda.
Yes? Okay. So now, why does it matter? I'm sorry. Is someone trying to speak in this conversation? Okay.
I'm sorry, could you clarify well-rounded numbers again, what you meant by that? Or
yeah, absolutely. So in science class, I remember I remember being kind of confused by this. They said, if you do 20 trials and it comes out as 10 of 20 do, and so 50%, 10 of 20, that just looks kind of made up. Okay. Honestly, okay. It can look made up. And so what they told us in science class was, if it comes out to 50%, do one more to make it 52%, 51%, or, so those decimals are really good, right? Decimals and something that doesn't, because just it doesn't look like, this is what it is, I'm sorry. It looks approximate if you have a 0 on the end or a 5 on the end a lot of the times. Okay. And so if you can say 54.2% as opposed to 55%. Does that answer that question for you?
It does. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for asking. And I know that my examples have those round numbers. Okay. And so why does it matter? How does this make a broad difference? Tie the issue to a large scale issue that impacts the economy, public policy, or anything like that. Like, what does this problem say about our state or about our city or about our school system? What does this say about us? How is it what down the line, how does this impact a bigger issue? So Minnesota does face, and I don't know if this is true anymore, honestly. This is a thing that I knew to be true a few years ago. And I know that we are making education more accessible at this time. But a issue that I heard a while ago was that Minnesota faces a shortage of doctors in the future if we don't make education accessible. And the second one as well, Minnesota faces a population crisis if we keep losing college students to outside states. This is an issue that legislators have been talking about for a while. And part of the reason that we were able to get the North Star Promise, which was passed last year, allowing free tuition for lower income students at the Minnesota state system. This is really good because it may of course, it'll be an issue for individuals, but how do we make this everybody's problem is the question, right? How is this everybody's problem? Of course, education is important for my children, but how is my children not getting an education a problem for the state at large? Does that make sense to you? And then why this legislator? Why is it important that this legislator in particular act? How does it benefit this legislator to support my cause? Why are they special? Don't we all, like I said, legislators are human. And if you can make me feel special, I'll do lots of things for you, right? And legislators are just like that. I've heard you speak passionately about the importance of public health. So I know that this issue is one that you in particular can help with. This issue is reflected widely in your constituency. That's a voter issue. And this is again about the power, voter power. And then you chair the specific committee. This committee will come before you, this issue will come before you in committee. And it's important that you as the chair or a person who sits on that committee understands the issue and supports it in the way that I need you to support it. Any questions so far? And anticipate the questions. What questions might a reasonable person have about what you're saying? What questions might an unreasonable person have about what you're saying? By this time, assumedly, you'll have spoken about this issue or at least been in conversations about this issue with a number of people. By the time that you've set up meetings with legislators, for the most part, most of us will have been talking in our communities about what's going on, about what we need to change, and you'll hear the questions. You don't have to answer all the questions you anticipate, but be ready to if they ask them, right? You don't always have to in what you've prepared to say. You don't have to cover all this stuff, but be prepared to respond when they're asked, especially if you've been asked the same questions by multiple people. Also, figure out your own. And I'm sure that, and one thing that happens is that by the time we get to meeting with our legislators, we're so well versed in the topic that we're way up here and it's hard for us to bring our brain back to the starting point. And so remember where you were at that starting point when you first heard about the issue, when you first figured out that this is something that needed to be changed. What questions did you have? And that may not be part of the everyday conversations that you have about it anymore. And then have a specific ask for the legislator. Would you carry this bill in the Senate, in the House? Would you support it in committee? Would you talk about it with your colleagues in the Senate, in the legislature? Would you make sure that it doesn't lose this specific aspect in committee? Now, in the beginning, we talked about the legislative process and how bills get amended. And sometimes the amended bill doesn't look a lot like the proposed bill at the beginning. Has anyone been a part of a campaign where there was a bill that had something very particular in it, and the way that it got amended and maybe even passed on the floor, it got changed and was either unrecognizable or didn't do the things that it needed to do that you thought were important about that? Or it came close? That's great. I'm glad. That's not something that I've had experience with either, but I have seen where that has happened to folks that I know, and that they look up and go, we really needed this aspect of it in order to really solve this particular issue. Chris said, I don't remember that, but I remember a lot of great amendments being made, being shot down. Exactly. Right. And so it could be one or the other. And that's another way. Can you please, I know this bill is already in committee, but would you make this amendment, right? And would you support this amendment? Thank you for that, Chris. And then a physical takeaway. Just something, again, the reason for this is that legislators, again, are human, right? And they can be swayed sometimes. And I don't mean that as a negative, but we all have that ability to be swayed based on what's in front of us. And so if it's just a business card, a button, a flyer, just something to remind them, we talked about this. This was really important. This is who I am. And if they have it in their briefcase or in their pocket, they'll pull it out and go, oh, that's right. I spoke to Lucy about this issue. And so if you can have a physical takeaway for them to have. And then a follow-up email. I'll ask that you write a thank you email in advance if you have that capability. Of course, sometimes you'll run into a legislator, or you'll talk to that legislator just on the street, or if you're in the Capitol about something else, you'll talk to somebody. But if you have the capability, write that email in advance. And afterwards, you can add a few sentences about what you talked about, and or reference the things that you heard him or her say, and answer questions that maybe you didn't have answers for. Excuse me. And if you would like to testify in hearings about this issue, let them know in this email. Any questions so far? I'm going to take down my screen for just a few seconds.
Could you show the slide before the specific ask? Was there something? I'm sorry. I was just, or excuse me, the slide before the follow-up email. Oh, didn't you?
Okay, that was the specific ask.
Oh, that was.
I'm sorry. No, I'm sorry. That was the physical takeaway. And so I'll pull that back up.
What's
here.
It called physical takeaway.
Just something to give them.
Oh yeah, because I was wondering what that was.
Okay.
Sorry, I'm just.
No, thank you.
Oh, take care.
Thank you. So again, that's just to make sure that they have something in their pocket, in their briefcase, whether it's even FAQ, frequently asked questions about the issue, maybe a news article. And I'll say this, there'll be times when you don't have all of these things, and that's okay, right? You have to have your message. You have to have a story and data, but altogether really comes together to make a really compelling engagement. You may not have yet a specific ask. You may be saying your specific ask may be, when something about this comes across your desk, please be aware of this issue. Your specific ask may be, I believe that one of your colleagues will be carrying this issue soon. And when you see it, sign on or support it. You may not have a specific reason this particular legislator is important, except that it's your legislator. And that's important enough. And I saw some in the chat. Absolutely. Thank you, Lori. It's very impactful if at least one part of your physical takeaway is attached to your story. There's some sort of sentimental or symbolic element to help them remember the emotional impact, which is a powerful motivator. Absolutely. So sometimes you'll see a button with a face on it or a name on it, right? And if that's your story, that's a story that you've shared. If that's the best story that you have, or your closest story, help Alanna, right? If you have my face on a button and your issue would impact me, then that can be useful. Thank you for that, Lori. I see Tara. Is it Tara or Tara?
It's Tara.
Roffler?
Tara.
Thank you. Tara asked earlier who would be the one to actually draft that bill. And thank you for asking that. And I apologize that I did not catch that when you put it in the chat. Different people draft bills. They are authored, quote unquote, by the legislator. But many legislators receive things that they, or carry things that they didn't write. There are whole organizations that exist to write legislation and give it to legislators. So usually they will see other people, other places, other states enacting things, and then they'll take that language and craft it or create it around how it would work in our state or in our municipality or whatever the case may be. A lot of times it's lawyers, and they have those in the Senate, of course, in the chambers for them to use in the offices. And so if you want to take a stab at writing a bill, please do. But that doesn't have to be your work if that's not your ministry is a thing we talk about. I come out of the Black church, and we talk about our ministries, right? Writing bills is not my ministry. That is not for me to do. And there are people who have that gift, who can really do that well, and who are there for you to do that. I assume and I believe that MPHA has some connections with people who can do that. Otherwise, you can take the issue to your legislator, ask them to help you to come up with ways to write this, and they have the resources to do that. Does that answer your question,
Yes,
Tara?
it does. Thank you.
Thank you. Martha said, with MDH SHIP initiative, legislators adding topic areas for LPH agencies to address without additional funding added issue of the year. Martha, would you speak a little bit to that?
That was just responding to your question about additional components being added to a bill that you had not anticipated. So
thank you.
I worked with the SHIP program for a number of years at MDH, and I just remember that came on. I think with dementia, they added dementia as a whole additional topic, and there was not additional funding when that funding came up. And so
yeah,
local public health, it just keeps adding to the pile of what they're supposed to address without the resources. Yeah. So
thank you for that. And I missed that when you put it in there. So thank you for adding that. And that's another thing, sometimes amendments get thrown onto bills that don't even have anything to do with the bill itself, but also can weaken it or can kind of take it off topic or take the sails out of the wind out of the sails of it, or take away the implementation. So it's really important that we have all of the things in the bill that needs to be there, and don't add extra stuff, especially without adding funding if it needs funding. So thank you for that addition, Martha. So now before you have all these things in front of you again. And so I want you to take we'll start with 8 minutes. Think about an issue that you have, or an issue that you've worked on, or that you would like to work on, or even something that you've seen that has already been passed. I want you to think about a legislator that you've worked with, if you can. If not, don't worry about that. And if not, just use your own legislator. And craft this message, during the conversation message. What is the message? What is a relevant story? Make up some data, because you might not have it at your fingertips. But make up some data that would help drive this information. Why does it matter? And you may be wrong about it. I want you to make some things up today, because we may not know the answers to these questions immediately. What is a specific ask? Maybe think of a couple questions that wouldn't necessarily be something that you would lead with, but that somebody might ask you. Have an idea for a physical takeaway, and think about what a follow-up email might look like. So again, Just if you can just quick write down what would the message be? What's a relevant story? Relevant data? Why does it matter broadly? Why a specific legislator? And if the answer is because you're my legislator and it's an issue that I deal with, that's a perfect reason. What would your specific ask be? If there's no bill to your knowledge about this issue, then the specific ask might be, would you carry a bill on this? If there is a bill, would you vote yes on this bill? Or would you vote no on this bill? Anticipate a couple questions. Think about a good idea for a physical takeaway. And what would your follow-up email look like? So if you can just take about 8 minutes to write down those things. And I am going to ask a few people to share. I'm going to leave this on the screen in front of you so that you can see those. So I'm going to give you until 1:40. I'm sorry, I said I'll give you till 1:40. I meant 12:40. If anybody has any questions, feel free to ask them either vocally or in the chat. About 2 more minutes. In about 30 more seconds. And since Lisa put something in the chat, I'm going to ask Lisa to start us off in about 30 seconds. So Lisa said, my idea is to pair or preface it with 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 something creative associated with the issue, like a painting or something, and mail or email it to them as a way to get their attention. They may appreciate the unique way of broaching them with the subject and be more willing to talk with you. An example is how we started this meeting with a poem. There's a class on Skillshare called Artivism that's interesting. And yes, we started this session with the poem because I feel like for me, poetry helps me to kind of ground myself and think about an issue in a specific way. And so, yes, art is a fantastic way to connect with not only legislators, but people, individuals, groups of people around a specific issue. So thank you for that, Lisa. What's another example? Who came up who came up with a message?
I could go.
Thank you, Diane.
Yeah, my name is Diane Sherwin. I am an intern here at MPHA, and I'm also going to school for my master's in public health at the University of Minnesota. And I really liked all of your questions you had on the right side about how to host the conversation. And I was thinking about it in terms of some work, some research I'm doing for my degree that's all about high rates of depression in adolescent girls in Minnesota. Um, and so, which is a pretty a big problem, for especially if you have children or people that know children, that a lot of our teenage children are really struggling mentally right now. So I wanted to think about that issue and try to figure out how I would answer some of these questions. So I was thinking about story wise, talking about a bit about some of my personal experiences having grown up rurally. I grew up in rural southwestern Iowa, and how I had a lot of experience observing in, like my neighbors, my friends, my peers, um, really struggling with a lot of different uh, problems of just experiencing poor mental health and not having adult guidance to uh, that either took those issues seriously or that would be able to be a part of handling those issues. So I won't go into like specifics about that right now on the call, but I have some stories there that I think would be really impactful. And then as for like the data, um, one of the findings that I'd found in the research that I was doing is I did some secondary data analysis on the Minnesota Student Survey, which is a survey that is administered every 3 years to fifth, eighth, ninth, and 11th grade students in Minnesota. And so, and it asks a whole variety of questions. So, one of the questions that I did some analysis on is about the how many students mentioned that they feel down, depressed, or hopeless. One of those clinical, like the PHQ-9 questions that's asked to screen for depression. And one of the findings that I'd found is that uh, in the high school students in Minnesota, 34% of male students said that yes, in the past 2 weeks that they'd felt down, depressed, or hopeless. But the gender inequity there is really large in that 55% of the female students said yes, they've had those feelings in the past 2 weeks. So
Wow.
that was some really, really sobering information that I thought I is an issue I care about personally, and I'm working on, and wanted to be able to let people know about. So uh in terms of my relevant data, I knew I could kind of come with some of that stuff and bring that forward. The why does it matter? I mean, for a lot of reasons, but I was definitely thinking about all of like the sort of cascading avoidable health outcomes, like um, early mortality due to loss of life, adolescent like violence in dating or domestic violence, disordered eating behaviors, social kind of cohesion and community um, relations that can really a lot of those reasons that all are really, really important problems that not just like cost the state money because they're expensive
Right.
to deal with, but they also really fracture like our community connections. And so my representative, I live in St. Paul, is Senator Claire Umu Verbaeten. And if I were to talk to her about this, I know that she cares a lot about health equity, understands like the importance of addressing inequities, especially for groups that might be vulnerable, like minors, um, and advocating on those things. So I think I would kind of ask her, to support there's a lot of different policies that could be involved in this. I don't have like one specific I'd say right now, but there's like school-based health center initiatives, or addressing like mental health provider, health professional like shortages, all sorts of different things that could help. So I could ask her about supporting a bill or something related to one of those topics, and ask her, or know that she might ask about, what does like the landscape look like for what mental health professionals are available or not available? What resources are missing? Like, how much will this cost? Different things like that. So I didn't have a physical takeaway for much to say for like a follow-up email, but those were all things I was thinking about. And I just wanted to say that I really appreciate all these questions that you had on here. And everyone for listening, I appreciate the chance to just get to sort of workshop that through something that have focused on. So yeah.
Thank you, Diane. That was a great example. I will ask, and I know that we're kind of starting with an abstract, because we don't have a specific, it doesn't sound like you have a specific thing that you're in support of right now. But what would the message be? I don't know that I caught what you said your message was.
Oh, I'm sorry. I guess just that, it's really concerning that students in Minnesota, especially our adolescent age, teenage, high school age students, are experiencing such high rates of depression. And that's something that really harms our community if we're just, not able to thrive when that's how you feel. So what you're going through, I guess that would be my main message.
Sure. So we need our students to be able to thrive. Thank you. Does anybody else have any feedback for Diane on hers, first of all? Because I really appreciate you starting us off. And it sounds like you're on your way to doing this work. And so, I think we can help Diane craft hers together. I think a physical takeaway, someone earlier said tying, there's all sorts of, another thing about a physical takeaway, to Eric's point, is sometimes there will be an event that you may have a flyer for an event about either supporting the legislation or about the issue as a whole. Sadly, to your point, Diane, there is a lot of mortality as a result of depression. And we have to be careful when we, because we've seen buttons with kids' faces on them. And so we do have to be careful. We can't just pull somebody out of the statistics. We do need to engage with the families. And some families will be open and will be eager to use their stories in that way, and some will not, of course, right? But that's a case where a physical takeaway can be very impactful, to the point that someone brought up earlier, and tied to a story. Go ahead, Lucy. Oh, Lucy, you're muted.
Sorry, lost my cursor there. I was just going to offer an example of a recent physical takeaway that I dropped off with some colleagues. In some of my public health advocacy work, we're working in the commercial tobacco prevention space. And for many years, folks have been working to eliminate the sale of all flavored commercial tobacco products in Minnesota. So this coalition that my organization is a part of, we have a Day at the Capitol event next Tuesday. And ahead of that event and throughout session, advocates are just trying to keep attention on the issue. And so earlier this month for Valentine's Day, a group of us met up at the state office building, and we divided into small groups, and some went to the Senate and some visited the House representatives and dropped off the little conversation heart candies that had like custom text on them that said, well, now I'm blanking on like the exact language that it said, but it said like flavors hook kids, and was just a really like literally sweet, but also creative and thoughtful way to hopefully get people's attention. And on the packaging, it had the House and Senate file bill numbers, as well as just some like clear and concise messaging on the issue. So I cannot take credit for the idea, but I thought it was super creative, tying in the day and trying to just kind of like passively and still like creatively engage people.
Thank you so much for that, Lucy. That's really creative and really great. And so different organizations, different people sometimes will have really thoughtful, creative ways to engage people. And it might be around the specific time of year. It might be around the specific issue. And so, of course, in the middle of August, the conversation hearts might be a little out of place. But, and so sometimes it's just important to think of what holidays are around, what's going on. And so, yes, thank you for that. And sometimes you'll be just like, we're all familiar with like the breast cancer ribbon. So sometimes it'll be something very recognizable like that, but sometimes it'll be something very niche. And so we do have to move on. Thank you so much, Lucy and Diane and others for your engagement on that. So the last thing we're going to talk about is preparing testimony. Eric, would you speak about what you put in the chat a little bit briefly?
Sure. And this is Kristen Erickson. My last name is
I'm sorry.
Erickson.
Thank you.
That's okay. No problem. Yeah, I was just trying to brainstorm what's a physical takeaway? What is something that would really speak to me here? And so I was just Googling it. And then, of course, my computer just automatically switched to Copilot, and it just gave me some really nice ideas. And I'm like, oh, okay. And then you talked about the blue ribbon. So I thought, it's fun to brainstorm, but maybe these can help you kick off your brainstorming a little bit, and maybe for other takeaways too that you can leave with your legislators.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
So in terms of preparing testimony, I'm going to pull this up all in front of you at once here. So distill your message. So you just really kind of did the testimony. I was tricking you into doing two things at once. And so a lot of times you can just take what you just created or what you'll have created in order to engage with legislators and distill it into one cohesive, kind of really distinct message or succinct message. Consider who is in your audience and their legislative priorities. And of course, you'll have done this, right, on an individual basis with the one-on-one or multiple one-on-ones. But if you are in front of an education committee, right? Your answer to why does this matter might be different for the same issue than if you're in front of, let's say, the health committee or, so again, consider who's in your audience and their legislative priorities or what their focus is. This is really a great time for your statistics. Like I said, when you're in the one-on-ones, the legislators don't necessarily want to know the exact numbers, but it's really great to be able to tell them those exact numbers and kind of just rattle them off really quickly. But in the testimony, excuse me, you can take your time with that data. Who's impacted? Who would be impacted by this solution? Who would be left out of this solution? Be careful to avoid jargon. A lot of us work in really specialized areas. I saw some in this chat, even some language that I didn't quite understand based on the field that you're in. and then practice it over and over and over and over again with multiple people. Anticipate the questions, and then also submit it in writing to the committee. And so that's what I have for you today. Thank you so much for your engagement. And if you have any questions, we have time for a few.
We actually are running pretty short on questions. I'm wondering if people can go ahead and chat them in or email us, and then we'll be able to maybe follow up with them. I think people did such a great job of engaging, and you did such a wonderful, amazing job of going through some great information. So please go ahead and email us at MPHA with questions, and we will try to figure out a method to get those back to you. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen and queue up Mary to go through our last slides really quick. And please, everyone, react in Zoom and let us know how much you appreciate Alanna, because it was such an amazing, amazing presentation.
Thank you so much. I appreciate the invitation and the opportunity to share with you.
Well, adding my appreciation, Alanna, for your work and your time with us today. And Chris, thank you for moderating. This session, by the way, was funded by our Blue Cross Blue Shield Center for Prevention, Racial and Health Equity Work project that MPHA has been working on for a while. And so we're thrilled to be able to keep bringing opportunities for learning, and we hope that you go out and practice. We've got the legislative session happening right now, so there will be more opportunities for action with MPHA coming up as well. And a couple of reminders, we have our annual conference coming up very soon in April in St. Paul at St. Catherine University, and early bird registration is open now until March 18th. And then if you are not a member, we are a membership organization, even though our events and committee meetings are open to everyone. We do ask that you consider joining MPHA, and we have a variety of MPHA membership levels available. You can also, while you're on our website, mpha.net, you can see our other upcoming events, check out committee meetings. If you liked this training today, definitely check out our Policy and Advocacy Committee, take a look at our Health Equity Committee, Membership and Communications. There's a lot. So thank you all so much for joining, and another round of applause virtually for Alanna.
Thank you so much. Have a great day.